Hello and welcome to my third YouTube show of this Thursday. You guys know how much I love YouTube and how much I love the YouTube thumbnails. I couldn't be happier to be here for my third YouTube show of the day. Drew Dinkmeyer's second YouTube show of the day. Cody will be here shortly, I hope. But this one, Jaguars, Bengals, Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, showdown tonight. Dink, good afternoon once again.
Yeah, it's good to be here. I'm super excited for any time you get these AFC South like teams on Thursday Night Football, the Jags, the Texans. It's always great. Always great fun. Because DFS and gambling is literally the only reason anyone's watching.
Edwin's coming out firing early. He says he needs more than 2 carries on flag plant.
Yeah, people hound me like all day on Twitter when we don't do the shows. And then I throw in somebody on Discord on the flag plant, and then I take heat for it like immediately. Miles Sanders, I'd like to talk about that game plan. Whew, boy.
Andrew says, did Adam lose a bet? Why is he the only one making the ridiculous faces in the thumbnails? Yeah. When the YouTube guys are working and they're grinding and they say we need this, I'm a team player. I give them the ridiculous faces.
They say we need this, and I respond with, I'll give you a normal face and all of the other content you ask me for. And that's basically how I've gotten out of the ridiculous face game.
Cody has refused to give a face for the thumbnail at all. Okay. This is an interesting one, I think, because the Bengals have played the exact opposite of how we thought that they would play. We thought they would be among the league leaders in pass rate over expectation. I thought that they took Jamar Chase where they did in the draft over an offensive lineman because they were just going to be like, screw it. We have Joe Burrow. We have T. Higgins. We have Tyler Boyd. We add Jamar Chase there. We have Joe Mixon. How can anyone stop us? Instead, what they've done is become extremely, extremely run heavy, even in neutral situations. And maybe they're protecting Joe Burrow's knee, but they're winning with it. And defense is playing better. Offensive line is keeping Joe Burrow upright. I think a macro trend in this slate is, do you think the Bengals try to execute this game plan again? And obviously, the heavy favor is that they do try to execute this run-heavy game plan again, because you don't need a wild game plan to beat the King Dolt, Urban Meyer, and this Jacksonville team. So how are you thinking about this matchup as a whole here, Dink?
Yeah, so I think the thing that's interesting about that is if you're firing many lineups via projection systems, you're not going to get that type of game plan, because with T. Higgins out, you get the target shares a little bit concentrated for Boyd and Chase. They look a little bit better. You're going to get a lot of 5-1s with Cincinnati, with the idea that they kind of dominate the game. And they're big favorites, and I get it. They have a good offense to be able to target. But if Cincinnati plays from ahead and really takes the foot off the pedal from a passing perspective, lineups that are going to be live, I think, are going to be these 4-2 underdogs, with the Jaguars, where you have like a Mixon captain, Cincinnati D, and 4 Jaguars like passing game options. I think is a pretty interesting tournament lineup on this slate. So it's one thing where you have the direction that the team has been playing all year gets kind of force fed into the way that people play the slate from an ownership projection standpoint. I don't know that will be the case because T. Higgins is out, and it's made the projections look really good for Boyd and Chase as well. And so instead, I think you're going to get the majority of the field firing these like 4-2s and 5-1s on the Cincinnati side. And if they're really, really run heavy, that's going to limit the amount of, points from the pass catching options.
One thing I think that Trevor Lawrence has shown he's at least capable of is being aggressive down the field, where Zach Wilson's ADOT has been so low. Trevor Lawrence has been very aggressive down the field, and he has weapons to do it with. DJ Chark catch rate has been laughable, but he still runs a 4.3. Laviska Shenault, they have not used it all, and Marvin Jones has been the clear-cut number one, and I think playing pretty well in general. Let's start with quarterbacks here in this game. So I think that Joe Burrow has been crazy efficient, right? And if forced, I think Joe Burrow can have a really good game here if forced. Of course, you have to start telling yourself a story of how he gets forced into it, and you can make some lineups that way. Trevor Lawrence has not been very good, but he could be forced into heavy volume, as we've seen in garbage time. What do you think about captains tonight at the quarterback position, and how often are you playing the quarterbacks tonight?
Yeah, so I think both of these captains in general, if you're playing them in the captain spot, you need at least 2 pass catchers with them. I don't think that, both Lawrence and Burrow have shown the ability to run a little bit. I'm not sure what Burrow's rushing outlook's going to look this year, kind of coming off the injury last year, but just generally, they're not high enough volume rushing threats that I would consider single pairing them. So if you're playing them in the captain spot, I definitely consider double stacking them. I think they're relatively weak captain plays, honestly. I think, if Lawrence hits, I guess it would probably be somewhat rushing oriented, but I imagine if these guys hit in a way, especially like Lawrence is going to hit in a way where the plays are going to be down the field and some receiver is going to make a big play that's going to almost immediately likely be into the optimal situation. And then Burrow, on the other hand, I think his passing game is going to be condensed enough that it's unlikely he like spreads it around so much that he's kind of the optimal captain. So these are guys where, if I was playing a bunch of lineups at this level, usually I try to keep my quarterback captain exposure down around 10% maximum for either guy. But on this slate, I might take it even down further. I might not play them at captain at all if I was playing a bunch of lineups and really trying to get unique.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's interesting. We obviously have the captain ownership projection here, 13.4 for Burrow, 8.6 for Lawrence. Let's go over to the running backs. I want to note that James Robinson's usage spiked last week in a big way for the Jaguars. He's separated from Carlos Hyde massively, both in base and in hurry up. So James Robinson's usage was really good last week. I can't say with any conviction that it's going to stick this week, because who knows what Urban Meyer is going to do on a week-to-week basis, right? But if you want to go off of last week's usage, James Robinson was really good, particularly in the pass game. Price gap here is absolutely massive. Carlos Hyde, 1,800. James Robinson, 9,400. And then, of course, we have Mixon, who did lose a little bit of pass down work to Samaje Perine last week, which is scary to some degree. But Joe Mixon, I think, is priced reasonably appropriately. We do have a massive projection on Joe Mixon in this game, as we expect them to have a lead, hold the lead, and ride Joe Mixon a lot. So, yeah, I think there's more downside in both Mixon and Robinson than maybe meets the eye, and they're a little bit more fragile. But Robinson certainly has the pass game role, and so I don't mind playing Robinson like with Mixon and stuff like that. I think that's okay. Carlos Hyde's price is intriguing, though. What do you think about the running backs thing?
Yeah, I mean, I never am excited to play Carlos Hyde under pretty much any circumstance. The price sort of forces you into considering him a decent bit on this slate, and that feels really uncomfortable. I think I'd be hard-pressed to imagine a situation where 2 running backs from the same team were in the optimal kind of winning lineup tonight. Mixon just dominates so much of the work from the Cincinnati side, and then I kind of feel like Jacksonville's a little bit more interested in starting to tilt things in James Robinson's favor, but also go like hot hand situation. So, and I don't think they'll have enough play volume from the running backs. So that's a rule I'd consider, is just max 1 running back from the same team in a lineup. And then in terms of how, I'd be utilizing them, one thing I would note is we're going to get, the ownership on Mixon up into the, we've got almost near 80%. Just remember, the Texans Panthers game from just last week where CMC was like up around 90+%. And, on these short weeks, weird things can happen. Carries can get managed, workloads can get managed, players can get hurt. In a really fragile format where you're looking for fragility because of the duplicates and the prize pools and different things, like fading Mixon's not out of the realm of possibility tonight. If you were to do that, I think you'd want to have James Robinson. I think you'd want to play kind of a script with the idea that Jacksonville's actually controlling the clock and limiting the plays a little bit, and actually like playing in a really competitive way that forces Cincinnati to throw the ball a little bit more. But all 3 of these guys are certainly in play. Hyde would be more for me for like larger field stuff. Even though the price discount gets you a lot, I just feel like I question the upside even at 1,800, and I'd rather take shots on guys that I think can make one big play, like my airball tight ends and whatnot, rather than Carlos Hyde, who I think he'd need, I think his median projection or his mean projection is going to look better than what his ceiling really is to me.
Yeah, I just want to look at the guys that are around Carlos Hyde real quick. Chris Evans has a little bit of a pass down role, and Jacob Hollister, with the trade, we don't expect Dan Arnold to be able to play a ton in this game. I'm not sure he's playing at all. And so Jacob Hollister, I think, is one that people are going to gravitate towards. We have a better base projection on Jacob Hollister than we do on Carlos Hyde. Auden Tate is one that I think people are going to play with T. Higgins out. And so there are cheap options that probably have a little bit more upside than Carlos Hyde's, unless Carlos Hyde is so touchdown.
That's the thing. That's the thing. It's basically a bet on whether Hyde scores or not. And I think Hyde is going to be utilized because I think his median projection or his mean projection is going to be good enough that I think he'll be utilized. He might be over-owned a little bit, honestly, in some of the smaller field stuff, because I think there are people who just put their cash game lineup in those things. And I think he could be in consideration for a cash game lineup because of the salary relief. And the other thing we should note is we don't have a Jags kicker on the slate. Mm-hmm. So we lost one other like salary relief option that you usually look towards.
Yeah, I want to move to wide receiver, but I want to stick here on the cheap guys for a second. Auden Tate last week ran 12 pass routes, and Mike Thomas ran 5. I mean, not a full-blown rotation, but Auden Tate did run more. Auden Tate was the one who was getting the buzz in the preseason. Auden Tate is like a big body, go up and get it, don't separate at all, just go up and make contested catches, and I think he can pretty reasonable out there. Brings us to the wide receiver position. And I think the wide receiver position is exciting for a bunch of these guys on this slate. Like, I want to play a bunch of them. I do want to note Laviska's role has really been slashed. I mean, it just seems like they don't like him, even with Travis Etienne down. Like, I thought some of that gadget stuff, some of that short area stuff would go to Laviska. It just has not. And so that one is scary. He certainly looks overpriced at 6,600. Chark at least has a chance to get behind the defense with 4.3 speed. But yeah, I mean, Marvin, Chase, and Boyd are going to look really, really good at the wide receiver position. And then we have some of these cheaper guys that I talked about before. I want to play a lot of these. Like, how many wide receivers can I play in one lineup, Dink?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could legitimately play 4 or 5. I mean, if they can fit salary wise, like I think it's a pretty good slate to be wide receiver heavy. The other thing that I'd note just on the Viska thing in terms of the role changing as well, I believe they activated Tavon Austin as well today. Yep. And so there's even less, like, if they're activating him and he's going to play, like, you have to think if they are drawing up any of that stuff and they haven't been using it for Laviska early on, like, it's even less likely to get it now. So his role is the one that I think is most confusing to me in terms of like how he wins. Because it seems like Marvin is like the number one option, and it seems like Shark is the down the field option, and it seems like Laviska is like a third option. And so he's the guy that I'm like least excited about from a ceiling and upside perspective, even though I like the talent of the player. And I think since he's the cheapest, you look at the total own that we're projecting, it's like right there with Shark. So I like Shark more than Chenault tonight. And then on the Cincinnati side, I mean, Boyd is just so much cheaper than Chase.
Yeah.
That Boyd's going to get really heavily utilized by the field. He's going to be he's going to be the highest owned wide receiver, is my guess, as our projection suggests. So I think when you start to dip into the like Auden Tate and Mike Thomas types, I think you might want to consider maybe limiting to one other, Cincinnati wide receiver there. Just kind of the way that builds work. But I like the wide receivers as a whole tonight. They would be the places that I take my shots.
Corporate has just DM'd me. They said, if this video doesn't get 100 likes, no flag plans. So if you don't get us up to 100 likes on this video, you can't get who Dink thinks will get roughly 2 carries and or 0 targets tonight,
or 60. There's been 160 burger in there. So I mean, look, it's a GPP dice roll.
Christopher says Auden Tate is going to win us a GPP tonight. Greg says don't ignore the Marvin Jones revenge. So Marvin Jones started his career with the Bengals. This was like a long time ago, guys. Like, he's since been on the Lions. Like, I don't know. Does he still have revenge in his heart? Does Marvin Jones? I kind of doubt that. John Fitzgerald says let Burrow cook. Yeah, that's kind of a narrative that I want to play, as like in the outcome where Jacksonville actually plays well and they let Burrow cook, and he could go just absolutely ham if he has to throw the ball 30, 35 times against this defense. 100 likes, DFS Czar. Oh, we're already over 100. Okay, so we have to do flag plans. Okay. Drew loves talking about tight ends because he thinks that he can get sneaky and save money with tight ends. And then he realizes that they end up
that they airball
with like 8 snaps in a game. However, the Jacksonville situation is at least interesting. They lost James O'Shaughnessy to the high ankle sprain. They make the trade for Dan Arnold. We think Dan Arnold's going to play a little bit tonight, but we don't think he's ready for a full-time role. Yeah. That leaves Jacob Hollister with something. Also, everybody knows by now what the deal is with CJ Uzomah, just kind of boring. I really don't think I'm going to play any of these guys. It seems like the field, though, we're projecting them to play Hollister and Uzomah at least some.
Yeah.
What do you think about tight ends, Drew? It's right up your alley.
Yeah, they're usually not particularly compelling. I think CJ Uzomah is basically picking up ownership on the projection side, basically because of the lack of the second kicker option. He's priced in that range that usually we have a second kicker there. And just because he's not in the player pool tonight, Jacksonville's kicker, I think Uzomah is getting a little bit higher owned. Hollister, I really, of the cheap guys, he was the guy that's was most interesting to me from like a ceiling standpoint. But looking at the projected ownership on him compared to like Auden Tate, I think Tate's the better play. And I think so. Of the cheap guys, I'd probably rate it like Tate, then Hollister, then Hyde for GPP for me, and then Mike Thomas. Mm-hmm. But it's not, it's not sneaky. I mean, the sneaky guy is Drew Sample, who could play 3 snaps tonight, and that could be the flag plant of all time. But no, there's actually it's not a great slate for tight end. It's not one that I'm super excited by any means.
Greg has a good read on you. He said Dink is going to flag point.
He's got
whoever.
He's figured it out.
That would be Drew Sample. He's going to flag point whoever CJ Uzomah's backup is. Drew Sample. Yeah, we have people just love talking about this returner. Well, the double dip. Yeah. Yeah. This narrative is interesting. Does DJ Chark get a touchdown in a college LSU narrative? In other words, Joe Burrow is on the other side and DJ Chark has a touchdown. Is that the narrative that he's pushing here?
Yeah. So you build your LSU stacks, right? Burrow to Chase, bring it back with Shark.
Right.
You got your LSU stacks lined up.
Bunch of LSU. Okay, kickers and defense on the slate. We mentioned that on DraftKings specifically, one kicker is not on the slate. How are you thinking about defense, though? Bengals defense has played really well this year. I used them in cash last week. Shout out to me. They performed against the Steelers' wretched offensive line and the statue that is Big Ben. Offensive line for Jaguars, I think, is reasonable. Trevor Lawrence is obviously more mobile, but certainly makes a ton of mistakes. Yeah. What do you think about defenses tonight?
Yeah, I mean, Trevor Lawrence has made not only a ton of mistakes, I mean, egregious mistakes, like really, really bad mistakes. Like he threw, a pick 6 last week that was really bad, like fading away off a back foot to like a defender or to a wide receiver that had no separation, got picked very easily. So I think the challenge tonight for me is I think the Bengals defense is going to be appropriately owned. I don't think the Jags defense. I think the Jags defense is a little overowned, honestly. I think getting the Agnew kick return touchdown. Agnew's a very good special teams player, but like that's a freak play. Somebody trying a 66-yard field goal. And I don't see like the way that Cincinnati's drawing things up where they're running a ton and they're doing all these short passes. I don't see a lot of opportunities to generate a ton of points there. So the Jags defense, I think, is actually going to be a little overowned. The Bengals defense, I would like to play, but I'd like to play them in very specific situations. I actually think this is like Trevor Lawrence has some like Kirk Cousins in him, where we've seen some primetime slates with Kirk Cousins where he has been like in the winning optimal with the opposing defense as like the only option from the team, because he throws like 2 pick 6s and then he and his receivers just rack up tons of catches as they're playing in catch-up mode. And I could see some scenarios like that tonight. So I think the Bengals defense is going to be correctly utilized by the field, but the types of lineups I think might be off. I think the types of lineups that they're going to come in are these like 5-1 Bengals onslaughts. I don't think that's the way they win, at least from a duplicated perspective that you really like win money. I think the way to attack it is to play them in more limited Bengals lineups. So maybe just Bengals defense and Mixon, or Bengals defense and one other skill player, and then load up on the Jags, because if the Bengals defense hits, it's hitting on a pick 6 that's getting an extra possession for Trevor Lawrence and the pass catchers from Jacksonville. So I think that's the way to play the defenses tonight for Cincinnati.
Yeah, I think that's really, really sharp for sure. Totally agree there. A couple questions here. What are your thoughts on leave salary leftovers with Showdown? So, yeah, we found in Millie Makers for main slates for like 12 and 13 game slates. It really doesn't make a difference. You shouldn't be leaving very much salary, if any. But in Showdown, I mean, my gosh, you can see huge edges by not maxing out your salary, by leaving plenty over. We have no problem with that whatsoever. Is Joe Mixon a must at captain in cash? We don't typically recommend playing Showdown cash. Actually, I haven't even thought about it tonight. I don't know if you have it all either.
I would play him at captain in cash. Yeah.
Okay. With the Tate, the popular Cincy punt, is there a favorite 600 or less Jags punt?
Not 600 or less. I mean, it's Hollister at 1K. Like that's the guy. There's not. You don't want to get deep into this Jaguars receiving pool. You know, it's not where you want to go.
All right, we have time for a few more questions before we get to the flag plants here. Maybe 5 minutes if you guys have some questions that you want to fire off to us about this slate or really anything at all. Ryan giving the CJ Uzoma chant. Okay. Yeah, we've talked so much about 4-2 underdogs. When you're doing a 4-2 underdog stack, would you lean in Jaguars captain? It's an interesting question. You can play 4-2s in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Do you like playing it with a Jaguars captain?
I actually kind of like it with the Cincinnati captain, where you're assuming. So the thing is, if you're assuming a wide receiver has all the production, right, and it's going to be a 4-2, then you kind of want that, like, let's say it's Chase captain with Burrow and then 4 Jags. If you assume it's going to be like Mixon as your captain, then I think, you know, you can go with like maybe one other receiver like Boyd that can rack up catches, but maybe not the touchdowns, or you can go with like Bengals D or something like that. But I generally kind of actually like them more with a Bengals captain, because I think the Bengals are going to be successful. Like, I think it's most likely that they're going to be successful and a high score is going to be generated from their side. But it can work either way. I just probably would lean in the direction of the Cincy player as the captain, and then loading up on Jags volume on the other side, and assuming that they're not super efficient in the red zone, and that's what's keeping them from being the captain.
Matt says, should we play Chase at a higher rate at captain than Boyd due to the higher price tag? So I sorted by projected captain ownership here, and it's actually not that big a difference.
Yeah.
We don't have that big a difference, so I'm not sure that it makes a big enough difference to go that route. What do you think?
I would agree. I don't think it's an inefficient. I think if anything, the benefit of is on the side of Boyd. You know, I think it's a more inefficient position, the current projected ownership for Boyd compared to Chase.
We don't talk a lot about FanDuel on here. I know some of you guys are playing on FanDuel. We don't talk a lot about it because it's kind of silly and there's so many duplicates. Dink has talked about how he's not even sure that it's beatable because there's so many duplicates. But do you have a favorite MVP?
So the thing that if you're playing FanDuel that you have to recognize is it's really, really strongly a game of avoiding duplicates. And when the way to avoid duplicates is generally to push quarterbacks lower on the totem pole in terms of plays. It's harder because you don't have yardage bonuses, you have half PPR. So the quarterbacks naturally just have such a much more dominant mean or median projection compared to all their other skill players. And so it's harder to push the quarterbacks down if you're using optimizers, but you kind of need to do it. And so if I was to say like a favorite MVP on FanDuel, it would probably be Mixon or one of the wide receivers. But in general, like you really, like, so many lineups are going to have two quarterbacks. They're going to have the running back. That, like, in FanDuel's pricing doesn't change based on the way that you use players, which is another reason. So you have to, like, the ways to get unique are generally to create kind of bad lineups, and it takes a lot of time to realize your expectation by being unique. And so it's like a game where you can bleed a lot of money playing the right way. And that's not a game that I typically love to play.
Yeah. Okay. Chris says he loves Auden Tate, but he has a sick feeling Mike Thomas is going to be the punt to catch the TD.
Got to go with the gut then.
I mean, if there's ever time to go with the gut, it's Showdown. All right. Looks like we've out of the questions here. You know what that time is? It is now time for the flag pants. Looks like we got up to 133 likes. So corporate is going to be just thrilled. 33 likes over expectation.
More thumbnails coming. Corporate's going to be on the prowl now.
Let's go ahead with the flag plan, and please, for the love of God, make it make it someone who's going to be on the field tonight?
Yeah, so Cody was around in Discord earlier, and he was answering some questions in the Showdown channel, and somebody actually correctly called my flag plant, and then Cody said he was going to have to fight me for him. So that's why Cody's not here. I've killed Cody. He will not be around anymore because I needed to secure this flag plant, and the flag plant is DJ Shark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, 4.3 speed could be garbage time.
I love prayer yards. I love prayer yards so much that I recommend Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I love all these just heaves down the field that make it look like we had a chance to hit the nuts, whether Darius Slayton drops them or whether Marquez Valdez-Scantling, misses them by 6 feet. We're going to get some of those tonight with DJ Shark.
That's a good one. That's your second best one of the year. Obviously, the Aaron Jones one was just a no-brainer. That's your second best one of the year. I actually think Marvin Jones has played really, really well this year for an old guy. And I'm not typically drawn to old guys. And I think that if it's not DJ Chark, you can see some really big games from Marvin Jones, given the role that he has if Trevor Lawrence can find some efficiency. So my main flag plan is going to be Marvin Jones. My game script gets absurd and totally flipped on its head. Flag plan is Joe Burrow just going nuts. Let's say Joe Burrow throws 35 times in this game. My God. I mean, he's going to be so efficient. The problem is that we're going to need a huge game from Trevor Lawrence. So I'm not even sure in that case that Joe Burrow would be the optimal captain. And we talked about at the top why quarterbacks maybe not be the best captains on this slate. But yeah, I like building as a general on this slate. Let's see what happens if Joe Burrow is forced into 35 touches and 35 attempts and try to be unique that way. All right.
I take it.
I don't know what this is about. PayPal says, "What's up, Ward Levitan? When are you stepping into an MMA cage?" I mean, pretty sure never, buddy. Pretty sure never. I don't know what that's about. Okay. That's going to do it. We got to make some lineups here. For Dink, for producer Adam. I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.